pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda this evening is approval of tonight's agenda. We have but 2 items on the agenda, so hopefully this will be a fairly non-controversial action. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve tonight's agenda. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously 4-0. We have our agenda this evening. Next on the agenda is an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for people in the public to speak on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but may be of interest to people in the community or related to city business. Once again, this would be an opportunity in addition to other opportunities that come up during the course of the meeting as agenda items come forward. But with that, is there anyone here this evening who wishes to speak under general public comment at this time? All right, seeing no one. We'll close the general public comment opportunity and move right into our business items. Our first business item this evening is item 7A, which is to receive an update from the Roseville Police Department's Multicultural Advisory Committee. So we'll ask those folks to come forward and
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Yep, and feel free to introduce yourselves, and we look forward to your update this evening.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm Terry Newby, and I'm a member of the Multicultural Advisory Committee, which works with the police department.
And I'm Etienne Javi. I'm a member of the MAC as well.
Thank you. So we thought it would be important for us to sort of bring the members of the council up to speed on what MAC has been doing. For those of you, I think most of you know, but for those who don't, the MAC was founded in 2020 as an opportunity to build relations between the members of the community, particularly the multicultural members, people of color, and really to build relationships with the police department. So the city council was instrumental in forming that. That was in 2020. Since then, MAC has been working with the police department to do a number of what we think are really important and influential initiatives. First, MAC members have been involved in selection of potential police candidates, not necessarily selection, but the interview process, being involved in the interview process with potential police candidates to make certain that they understand the complexities and the nuances of working in a community like ours that is a very diverse racial and ethnic background. And so MAC has been working with the police department on some of those hiring decisions. We have also, with the police department, made presentations to high school students at the Roseville Area High School to make them aware of what MAC is and what it does, and to give them opportunities to volunteer with the committee and show leadership. And with that, we've had some great cooperation from several teachers and administrators at Roseville High School, including Greg Euland, who has been very, very cooperative with us and made his students and his classes available to a presentation with the MAC. And that was, for those who were there, it was, if you haven't been in a high school before in a while, talking about policing, it was a very interesting afternoon, and we learned some things from it, and it was good. But I really feel that we made a really good impression, and it was a good way for us to reach out to the youth of Roseville. Another thing that we've done, working with the police department, is the traffic stop initiatives. And for those of you who don't know, the Ramsey County PD, John Choi, the St. Paul Police Chief, and Roseville Police Department made executive decision to no longer rely on low-level, non-public safety-related equipment violations for stops. So expired tabs, license plate lights being out, tail light, that sort of thing. The type of what I describe as non-public safety-related low-level equipment violations, because the data indicates that those types of stops disproportionately affect people of color and low-income people. And the data also show that when you pull people over for those things, you almost never get evidence of an existing crime or a larger crime. So basically, police resources are being used to pull over people of color and low-income people with almost really never any, for lack of a better term, fruit, if you know what I mean. They don't actually yield other crimes. And so the data spoke for themselves, and with the cooperation of John Choi and the St. Paul Police Department and Roseville, which really led the way, the department is no longer going to make those low-level, non-public safety equipment-related stops. Now, they're still going to pull people over, but instead of ticketing, they're going to make them aware of resources where they can get those things fixed. You should get your tabs replaced. Here's where you can get your license plate bulb fixed. Here's the things you can do to fix that instead of simply pulling people over, which leads to some unpleasant encounters both for law enforcement and for citizens over something that typically isn't a public safety violation. So those are the things that I think we've been up to. Etienne, please let me know if I forgot something.
I would like to add a little bit of context to the last aspect that we just talked about, which is the concept of poverty. It's not a crime to be poor, and we have been working with the police department to say if people don't have enough money to fix the broken tail light, and we give them ticket, a fine, are we not adding more to the poverty that started the whole cycle in the first place? And as a result of that, the police department in coordination with Brunswick County has taken the action that Terry was talking about earlier. And I believe there was some more concrete data when it came to the impact of that policy since it was enacted. I think we talked about maybe 1,800 stops not being made since that policy was enacted. To me, that is a really big number. That is 1,800 people who otherwise would have been pulled over, and interaction between police and community, bad thing could have happened. But the even nicer thing about this thing is, if you don't want to pull over people and you try to get them to know, however, that the equipment is not functional, how do you do it? And I was so pleasantly surprised that the police officers can, when they run a plate, an email or a mail can be sent to the person's home with actual number to call, so that there's no interaction between police officers and community. And that's just a wonderful, wonderful thing that I'm so happy that you guys are doing. It feels good. So just wanted to add that. One other thing that we as MEC have been involved in is the hiring of the social worker embedded in the police department. We are proud that Roseville is taking those steps to make policing not about crime, but also about poverty. How do we solve the issue? How do we face poverty?
Excellent. I think that wonderful point. Thank you. I'd forgotten about the data, the numbers.
Thank you for that update. Are there any questions or feedback from the council to the members of the MAC who are with us this evening? Councilmember Strong.
Thank you, and thank you for the update on the partnership with Lights On. That's something that I came to Corey with in the police department in 2019 after going to a workshop with the members who started that, and so excited about it, and it's nice to see that it's in full place because it's had great results, and I actually had seen it win an award elsewhere from the Minnesota Council on Nonprofits for Impact, and so I think it's really great that we are participating in this influential program, and we can be models as well to other places, so I really appreciate that. I know when I've had previous conversations with ATN specifically, but about fear around the police, it really I'm glad to hear that reduction in crime in those police interactions. It's hard for me to imagine at times, or not anymore, but in the past, to understand what it's like to interact unnecessarily with the police. And so between being a person of color and someone who may be as poor, it's really important to be reminded that that can be a really scary situation, and that it takes a level of harm out of the equation that just doesn't need to be there. I was curious, I feel like they have two questions. How many members are currently on the MAC? And then kind of, I don't know if I ever feel strongly about what our relationship is between what you do and what we do. Our other commissioners are appointed by us, and that's not, and yet we love to know about your information and what you're doing, but we don't have a lot of oversight or impact or decision-making. And so I don't know if there's a formal relationship between us, but I think it would be interesting to consider as we move forward.
Sure. Well, I can tackle those. Right now, we have, I believe it's approximately 20 listed members of the MAC. Obviously, we have different levels of participation. There are some who drop off, there are some who join, but right now, as of my email list my email membership list has 20 members. And so we are actively recruiting. We've gotten a few more members from the community. A couple of pastors from the faith communities in Roseville who've expressed an interest in joining, and so we welcome them. There's also been some interest from some college students at the U of M. One of them was ultimately unable to join because of her schedule. Apparently, they're expected to go to school. And so she was unable to join because of her schedule, but she did tell me that when her school schedule gets straightened out next year, she really does want to become a member, and there are other students of color at the U of M who are also very interested in joining. So there's a pipeline there. So right now it's 20. Hopefully we get more because there's some who participate more than others. As far as the relationship with the City Council, I think you're right. I don't know if there's a formal reporting relationship. I certainly would be happy to do that because I think it's important. This is, as I tell the members of the committee, this is a wonderful opportunity. It's a leadership opportunity, not just for us, but for Roseville, to show the world what effective community-based policing looks like. And, when I did my research, there are a lot of places that don't have this. And there are a lot of places that, frankly, don't want it. And so for us to have it and want it and make it work with that partnership with the police department, I think it's important. So I would very much welcome a whatever type of formal relationship the council would consider, because I view this as an opportunity for the council to promote MAC, which in effect promotes Roseville, and I think it aligns with the community's values.
And if I may add one line to it, it is with this important data showing the improvement, the numbers, is there any way the city or the city council could help get the word out? Because we as MAC can be doing some of this work with the police department, but if we don't have the capacity of getting the words out, how does the community know that this work is being done and the impact is having on the day-to-day activity of people? So that would be something that if we can get some help from the council, we'll appreciate it.
I think that's probably something we can look at, a newsletter article or something like that as a follow-up, and, maybe just kind of a scheduled periodic update from the MAC on whatever is going on at that particular time or since the last update. And then, in terms of the data, we certainly have our pretty robust data portal on the police department's website also, that if that data isn't there, if it is there, we can highlight it better, or if it isn't there, we can add it. But I think those are excellent points about that communication piece. I saw Councilmember Graff.
Well, just to piggyback on that, also, even you being here tonight, I know we don't have a huge following, but people do. I'm always surprised at how many people do watch the council meetings, so this is good to get this information out. Because I'd heard a little bit about what you're talking about, but even on the council, I hadn't heard as many details as you're talking about right now, so this is really helpful, especially reaching out to the high schools. I think that's crucial to get some input from the youth. They have a different life experience than someone my age, say, so I think that's really helpful for us. I wanted to also say, I think your points about poverty are so important, because that is a cycle that can just spiral down when you end up with, maybe we don't think a traffic ticket is the end of the world, but someone who's already working 2 jobs and has a family of 4 and their spouse is working, it could be the thing that tips them down to losing their car or whatever it is. So I think that's really important work. I want to thank you and the police department for that.
The thing I wanted to add in relation to that is the other aspect of that is oftentimes, those very minor equipment violations can be sort of an entry into the criminal justice system for someone too, especially if they're not able to pay their fine. Then now they've got a warrant out, and next time they're seen by officers, the license is checked, it says there's a warrant, they get pulled over. And as we unfortunately know, that those types of situations can lead to adverse consequences as well that nobody wants to happen either. And so the less that we can sort of bring people into a system that they really don't need to be in, I think that program is exactly the benefit in terms of that aspect as well. So definitely wanted to make sure that folks in the public are aware of that it's, there's the financial aspect, but there's also that sort of potential for somebody to just sort of get into a cycle of, not being able to pay a fine, having a warrant out, maybe evading or not being able to make a court appearance. Now there's another warrant out, or there's an enhanced warrant, or whatever. It becomes very, very, bad for somebody very quickly, and that can just have so many, adverse consequences for individuals that began this whole thing with, a broken tail light or a missing license plate light or an expired tab or something like that, so exactly. Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, I'd also like to echo what Councilmember Groff said, but I also wanted to add, I really appreciate you working on some positive solutions for this. I mean, so many times we look at data and issues, and yet you're working on some ideas and solutions to make things better, and I can really appreciate that. And working with the police department so closely, I can't imagine a better place to try to improve things for our community. So thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Rowe, to your point, obviously, I mean, it would be a huge tragedy to have someone involved in the criminal justice system because their license plate light was out. It just makes no sense for anyone.
Exactly. Right. The other thing I was just going to mention in terms of a formal relationship with the council, I'm not sure that the committee necessarily wants to get to a point of being like a commission as actually both of you have been on city commissions. So you know the interview process and the council deliberation over appointments. And I think that it was intentional, I believe, to set this committee up without a lot of that, for lack of a better word, baggage, because people can engage as they're able to. There's not this formal process and expectation of strict attendance rules, or you get tossed off or things like that. So I think that arrangement seems to make a lot of sense. And
I agree.
So
Having been on a commission,
I'm not saying anybody was suggesting that, but I definitely think the connection in terms of communication and reporting is beneficial, and we should work to continue that and make sure it's a pretty routine thing.
right. Having been on a commission, I like, for this, what we're trying to do here, I believe the informal format works best. I was thinking more along reporting or maybe regular report outs in terms of the relationship, but I agree, I don't think that we need to be at the formal level of a commission.
And I think I was thinking more of some of our work with some of the other commissions where we have asked them to kind of have goals and things like that. So we are working and we look to them, at least I look to the other commissions and look to them for giving us guidance. And so I would love to be able to take this information and go, okay, well, now we know this. And obviously we're here and we're smart and we can do that on our own, but it would be really nice in some way to formalize a relationship in that we have this thing that is unique. And so maybe it just stays within the police department. But I just thought if there was an opportunity to talk more about it and make sure that it's seen as something that kind of helps guide the work of what we do. We don't need to manage how many meetings you attend, and we don't need to do all that. But I think just formalizing that consultancy, that understanding that you can come to us, that you can report out to us, and that we seek and respect what you bring to us. So.
Well, and for that matter, if there are policy recommendations that aren't maybe directly advising the police department itself, but maybe more to something that comes to the council level of consideration on a policy basis, absolutely, if the MAC wants to bring something forward, make a suggestion for something we should be taking a look at, maybe adopting as a policy, I think that's something we're looking for too, so definitely.
Wonderful.
Okay.
All right.
I guess the question for asked today is what are the ways? I think the mayor, you mentioned the city newsletter, what are the ways this work can be promoted to the community. I think that would be the big ask from us today. Not that we necessarily need an answer today, but something that if you can help us get the word.
Sure,
that would
I
be
think
awesome.
between our communication staff, our police department staff, and members of the committee itself, we've got a lot of good minds here we can put together towards coming up with some ways to communicate. The reason I mentioned the newsletter is that still, at least as of our last survey, which goes back a few years now, that's one of the primary ways people in the community seem to get their information, so we don't want to miss out on that opportunity, but certainly if there's other ways to make those connections with folks in the community as well. I like the idea of visiting the high school, visiting classes and things like that the committee's already doing. So, where there are those opportunities out there to do that.
Right. And I think there's a lot of different ways we can, we've got plenty of people here who are good at the communications and in opening up those lines, so I think that's something we can continue to work on. But I do think regular reporting in some way, or at least regular updates, where you guys know what we're doing and we can seek input from you, I think that would be beneficial, so thank you for raising that.
And just for the benefit of the folks who are watching the meeting, either live or later on, there is information in the council packet this evening with some of the details that were talked about in your presentation as well. So folks can get to that from our packet portal, as it were, as well. So, all right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And pass along our thanks to everybody else on the committee as well.
Thank you.
Right, I guess we'll take about a 5-minute break here just to configure for the Planning Commission joint meeting. We've got a lot of arranging to do for everybody. Anybody who wants to can come up to the table.
It's kind of a iconic.
More the
place to get it,
merrier.
maybe.
And I went 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
I also know
We all have to sign in?
Oh, yeah.
No, you do not. We know who you are.
We know who you are.
You know better.
And we know where you live. That's right. That's the bad
You
part.
didn't get it? You didn't get it?
No, but my husband was really excited.
Oh, no.
Janice, you receive it.
I'm boosted.
I'm good. Unless you want to see here where the computer is.
So the question I asked when I heard about the joint meeting, and it was going to be a work session, I said, well, it'd be great if we can all be at the table. And then I said, it'd be great if we could actually all be at the table.
Yeah.
Looks like we're fitting everybody. So let's see, in terms of mics for folks, why don't we, maybe that one can be shared by the two gentlemen at the end. Let's maybe sit between them, and then Michelle, if you and Pam can share that one, and then Michelle and Tam, and then I think we're covered. And then we got a bonus one there too. Okay. Very good. And I've lost track of who the chair is right now. Is it you? Okay. All right. I apologize for that.
Oh, that's all right.
All right, we're ready to come back from a break. It's big TV. We're back from our short break to configure, and the table just got a lot more crowded for folks, but hopefully we can fit all the people and the conversation into our discussion this evening. We're welcoming our Planning Commission for a joint meeting. It's been a little while since our last joint meeting with the Planning Commission, so we appreciate you all being here. And I know we've had a little bit of turnover on the commission as well, so a lot of newer faces to see again, and appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chair Pribble to introduce folks on the commission and then kick off the conversation this evening.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and council members, for having us here tonight. It's nice to be back again after about a year to regroup and see what we've been doing the past year and where you might like us to head in the coming year. We could just go around and who we are.
Tammy McGehee?
Michelle Crizzle.
Pam Aspinus.
Eric Biorum. Matt Bauer.
So, you have in front of you activities and accomplishments since our last joint meeting, and I won't go through listing all of them, but I thought it might be helpful to highlight a few of them that influenced the items that we brought forward tonight for consideration. So one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time on the past year was the Phase 2 zoning code update project. And that consisted of the shoreline ordinance and also studying sustainability incentives. And we know that in the end, the sustainability incentives didn't move forward. But that is one of the things that we were looking for possible direction from you tonight. Are there other ways besides the path that we had pursued to this point that might be worthwhile exploring in the coming year? Another item that we looked at this year that related to that is the conditional use request for several drive-through facilities. So thinking about that in terms of sustainability, is there something there? Other communities are considering not allowing drive-throughs or drive-throughs requiring other criteria to enhance the sustainability, considering the trade-offs that there are with drive-throughs of additional traffic and exhaust, things like that. There were also several preliminary plat requests and conditional use requests for increased density, and those generated a lot of conversation among the community and also among the Planning Commission about both understanding our role as a quasi-judicial group and making sure that the community understands that role, that we have some responsibilities and some limitations in what we can do. And so one of the things that we really appreciated in you allowing us to consider our purpose and scope and duties is really enhancing that communication with the community and helping them to understand what our role is, limitations and the opportunities, and their opportunities as far as communicating their interests in how we move forward. And related to that was potentially having the opportunity to have more than one joint meeting per year to discuss things that might come up, because we have just gone through 2 layers of zoning updates. One of oddly, a highlight of the last year was the conditional use to allow a surface parking lot as a permitted use for FedEx on County Road C2. And the reason that was a highlight, at least for some of us, was that inadvertently we got the opportunity to provide some feedback to them that was helpful in the design, made it, I think, a better design, and improved the community, improved the neighborhood. So conversations around that led to one of the requests that we have for you to think about, to consider adding a sketch plan process to allow for informal planning commission input before project applications are submitted. So in that case, initially they submitted a parking lot plan that it turned out was not the one that they intended to submit. So we continued the discussion to the following meeting, but that we still had discussion about it enough that they were able to address some of the neighbors' concerns for the following meeting. So we felt that we had been able to help the community rather than just have to say yay or nay to a fixed point. So I think that is a very quick summary. So again, our questions or concerns for you tonight are looking at our purpose, scope, and duties, the 4 items that we listed on the attached memo, and then if there are areas of zoning code that you would like us to look at in the coming year related to sustainability objectives.
All right, great. And I did want to maybe start with some feedback, just because I remember the case of the parking lot and some of that back and forth, and certainly I'll have some thoughts, as well as other council members perhaps, on the sketch plan process. But one of the things I kind of wanted to start with, especially from my perspective as long ago, having been on the Planning Commission and certainly been on the council and been through a lot of this process, is that I don't want the commission to feel so constrained that all you can do is either say yes or no to a proposal based on whether it checks the boxes in the code, because I think one of the legitimate roles and important roles that you have is is as you're hearing something, if it seems fairly clear to the commission that something in the code is not working properly, I think a legitimate outcome of consideration of a proposal could be to say either we recommend denial for these reasons, or tabling because we'd like to work on the code, or, you know, we've not made a recommendation and we would like the council to ask us to look at this particular issue, or those types of things. You know, I think that it can be easy to think that all you have to do is you know, check the code, and if it matches the code, that's the end of it. And I don't want you to feel that you're kind of powerless to do anything else. So I want, you know, and please, counsel, correct me if I'm off base here, but I think, you know, and I know Commissioner McGeehee, when she was on the council, that was one of the things I think that we were trying to do, was to make sure that the Planning Commission really understood that a part of its role can be to say, hey, you know, yes, this meets the letter of our code, but this code doesn't make sense right now. And in the light of, you know, where we are today as a society, you know, sustainability may be different, or just our own experience with past projects as well. You know, that sometimes that can be something that can inform the process. And so, you know, just from my perspective, I would prefer that the commission not feel so constrained that they can't allow an outcome such as one of those as a result of a proposal being before you. It makes it a little more challenging, perhaps, and you still have to sort of corral your members into a majority towards that perspective, if that's the direction the commission wants to go. But I certainly want to make sure that you have a good understanding from our perspective as the council that's a legitimate outcome, is to say, let's, you know, because we've had cases where the commission has passed something along to the council, and the council has ended up putting brakes on something kind of based on issues that were raised during the commission discussion. So, you know, certainly I think the commission has as much opportunity to do that as well. You know, you certainly have your obligation to sort of pass your judgment onto the council, but I think a legitimate judgment is to say, yes, technically it meets the code, but I think we need to look at our code again. So wanted to get that out there kind of right away and make sure that's at least understood as to how I'm coming at it. And please, once again, council, if I'm off base there, let me know. Here we go, Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, I agree with you, Mayor, on that, because I was looking at one of your items that said allow commission members to add discussion items. You always had that, you were allowed to do that all along, so I was a little surprised to see that in here, that, you know, based on what the mayor just said, that's what we were expecting, that if something came up, you could say, we need to add this to our agenda and talk about it because something came up in the community or whatever. I was hoping that you already knew that was something you could do, so I was a little surprised to see that.
I think the problem was there was no formal place on the agendas that came to us for us to add anything like that. And so it would require us, I think this was as close as we came to a consensus that there's something missing. We would like to do this, but it doesn't appear on our agenda as an item that is available to us.
Very similar to what we do on our agenda.
Right.
So-
It's on your agenda, it wasn't on ours.
So what do we need to have that added to your agenda?
I think you have to tell staff that it's
Add it to your
okay.
agenda. You guys okay with
Well,
that?
you know, I think what we just may want to look at, because we do have part of our council rules of procedure that applies to commissions and part that only applies to the council.
Right.
To the extent that there may be a lack of clarity on that, or a lack of good direction to commissions on that, I think we can certainly work on that, and that we don't have to wait till necessarily our January
Right.
meeting at the council to do that. If that's something we want to take a look at, we can always update our rules of
Because if you
procedure.
talked about wanting them to talk about things, you know, that sounds like they need to be able to talk about.
Well, I think there's
Yeah.
two aspects of that. Certainly, as something is being considered, you have the opportunity to discuss as part of your deliberation and make a recommendation. But to the point of if you say, you know, we've had 4 of these, or whatever number, 7 of these, drive-throughs, and we'd like to talk about drive-throughs, you know, I think that we should probably have a mechanism set up for you to be able to come back to that, so to speak, rather than only considering land use cases as your agenda goes
That would
forward.
be helpful in terms of preparing for this meeting, and if you wanted to consider the opportunity, if something comes up, that we could have another joint meeting that would help us to collectively prepare for that. because otherwise we don't want to mistakenly have a quorum by having side conversations about, what did you think about those drive-throughs and what, so.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is it doesn't have to be just one more joint meeting and officially scheduled. I think anytime something comes up, and if you've got this process in place and you can add something to your agenda and have a discussion about it and you come to a recommendation, certainly that should be an opportunity either to do a joint meeting or send some representatives or whatever's most appropriate. And I've got some more thoughts along those lines too, but I don't want to leave other council members out of the conversation as well. So certainly, Councilmembers Groff and Strawn, if you've got other thoughts, Councilmember Strawn.
Thank you. And a lot of these are just notes I was taking as you were talking, but I think as you're looking for items that I see as, I really appreciate, I read through all of the things that are sent, that your meeting minutes and, your discussions and your agreements or your disagreements. I really find those very helpful in making a final decision. A lot of times by the time we get to us, people are frustrated. They're like, well, you didn't do anything. Well, we really rely a lot on your reviewing it totally, because we're kind of working across such a large picture. But I think as we come into the sacred settlement arrangement with the state of Minnesota, and they have many specifics that are required, but helping us apply how that works for Roseville, and if there's anything in particular we need to do to make sure that we can comply with that around planning, I think that would be very helpful. I appreciate the continued effort to work towards sustainability. But I'd say even a step further in that, in my mind, is the walkability of our city. And so people constantly remind us that the walkability and the access is really key. And so if there's anything that can be done within our ability as a city to focus on that. And then you listed some properties that potentially land use applications, but I see a couple others that are sizable that should probably be on your radar, is the vacant State Farm DOE building that really could have significant impact if and when it changes into however many entities go there. And then there's all the vacancies on Highway 36 right now, restaurants and the car dealership and other things. So just finding the right mix of things, making sure that our zoning accommodates what we want to have in those kind of places. There's a new church going in the Lifetime Fitness, so making sure that we understand how that fits into the fabric, and then just some of our aging shopping centers that may have a lot of vacancy, wondering how those will fit with the community and the neighborhood around it. So obviously working with the departments and making sure that it's within our ability to do, but I think those are big things that will be decisions that need to be made within the next couple of years that need to be on all of our radar, but I really appreciate if you're thinking along how that can work with planning.
Councilmember Groff?
I find this very interesting because I struggled with these exact same things when I was on your commission. So I hope we can make some movement forward. There was confusion when I was on the commission on what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do, and it sounds like some of the things you're bringing up are exactly those. So I would like to see us move forward so that you could have some sort of, discussions and address these things and actually have some input on what could be done in the city in some ways, not micromanaging necessarily, but in bigger pictures. So those are just some things I think from when I was on the commission I would have liked to have seen, and I would hope that you would be interested in that too.
I wanted to get to the topic of the sketch plan review, because I know that's a process that in one form or another, I think Roseville has done in the past. It goes back a while, because I remember seeing those before, and I think they were actually even done before the city council sometimes. I'm not sure that that's always the greatest thing, because I think developers just kind of like cater to what the whims of whoever the 5 people are on the city council. Yeah. And certainly, one of the things we set up when we revised our process a number of years ago to add the open houses was the notion, we were hearing a lot from residents, that, we don't hear about these projects until it's before the city council. We didn't even know about the planning commission hearing, and things like that. So, hopefully the open house process has helped get people aware of projects and help even with the word of mouth in the neighborhood if not everybody sees or is aware of the postcards for hearings and things like that. But I wanted to get your thoughts as to, do you think that touch with the Planning Commission maybe should happen even prior to a neighborhood meeting, and so that the developer can understand maybe what some of the issues are that they need to pay attention to when they're having that open house? And so I just wanted to kind of turn the question back to the commission a little bit for some maybe additional information as to what your thought process is on talking about doing the sketch plan and how it fits into our existing system.
Yeah, others weigh in too, but I think it would be helpful to have it as early as possible. Coming from the other side of the table, I know that being an architect, we'd prefer to get input from jurisdiction as early as possible so that you're not headed down a road that in the end is not going to be something that is enjoyed by the community. So the sooner the better, and I think just in terms of the procedural requirements, having it before the open house also gives everyone more time to deal with it rather than having open house and then there's a fixed schedule of limitation of time before which we have to make a decision, and you have to make a decision on it. So for those couple of reasons, it would be helpful.
And I think yeah, that's a good point, because I think one of the biggest feedbacks I get, and I think you all have too, is people come and talk, and then they say, well, I feel like there's nothing I can do, or, it's the decision's made, or, at what point do I actually influence, and, and so I think if you allow people to come earlier in the process, maybe they would feel a bit more heard versus when it's already done.
I think we need to get that communicated too, because I think by the time people show up at these meetings and open houses, they're thinking it's a done deal, this is what it's gonna be, and that's not what it is. Like, I think the key to all of this is some communication mechanisms, even between us and you and the community, is what I'm hearing.
And I think sometimes there is a mismatch between the expectations of the community and what we can do and what you can do. And we may be able to change the zoning in the future to accommodate some of the issues that come up, but we can't change it on the fly when the person has their materials there. I think if
We've done it before, of course.
yeah. If the process, I think, began with the staff and maybe the developer meeting with the community before the developer has put massive amounts of money and effort into having his plan that he's now rolling out in the community, I think that that's the key, because nobody wants, the developer least of all, wants to make a lot of changes when people come and say, well, wait, this isn't really what we would like here. And he has already spent, $30,000-$40,000 getting all his ducks in a row. And I think if somehow the planning department or a subset of the group that wants to participate could participate in that neighborhood open house developer, I own this piece of property and I would like to do X. What does anybody think about that? If I do X, are there any things that I can do to make that more palatable? And then, at that point, when there is some flexibility, then even though the developer can walk away and say, I'm gonna do it the way I wanna do it. The zoning says I can, and that's what I'm gonna do. And some of them will. But I think some of them, like we found with the FedEx, they really, the particular developer in that case really made a great effort to be even more accommodating than the residents were asking. And so I think the good developers really do want to have their projects accepted, and they want to work with the community to the extent they can, but they don't want to be in the position of being forced to do something that they don't want to do also.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would say that the key to the whole sketch plan process, I apologize for my voice, is that it's an informal presentation, right? Like Chair Pribble, I've been on the opposite side of that, and it's,
extremely helpful just to get, preliminary sketches or renderings or something in front of people to get their feedback. But what helps this side of things is that it puts notes on paper. And so when that comes to us formally, we have this information that we said, we found these things important. Here's what we wanted you to look at. Let that developer come back to us or whoever's doing the project and say, I looked at these things. Here's what I did based on that feedback from the informal meeting and the open house. And then here's what I couldn't do. And that gives us a much more objective look at whether or not this kind of meets the intent of what the city wants us to look at. I think that's a great point, and something I was going to mention as well is having sort of a single reference document, if you will, that tracks that feedback and the developer's response through the process, regardless of whether we do a sketch plan step or not. I think that improvement would be helpful too. I think to Ms. Truzel's point, the notion of better understanding on the part of the participants, even in the open house, that are members of the public, as to how early in the process that really is and how influential they ought to be able to be in the neighborhood input into a proposal. I think it still sounds like that there may be a benefit to have that touch with the Planning Commission even going into that open house, because of the fact that the Planning Commission, representing people in the community and a variety of different perspectives that may not even be completely represented on the council, is an opportunity. And just from your experience in looking at applications as part of your career on the Planning Commission, you can provide some insight to developers that can be valuable. And I would say, certainly a lot of proposals go through a staff review and don't even go any farther than that, because the staff says, this isn't even close to meeting our code or even our, what our comp plan aspires to and things like that. And but none of us at this table even know about those proposals, and that's a good thing in the process. But I think there can be a benefit even from a staff perspective, and I certainly don't want to speak to staff, but to have some more insight about some of those things that well, yes, it does meet the letter of things, but here's some concerns that are coming from more people than just the members of the staff, who are very well trained and do their jobs extremely well, but may not always have that additional insight just from sort of the community. And so I think that's a valuable role for the Planning Commission to play. And I can see how that would work, and I think we would just need to think about the parameters around which types of proposals we're talking about doing sketch plans for. Is it every single thing? Even things that don't have hearings before the Planning Commission or the Council, probably not. But I think so. I think that'd be an opportunity once again for an agenda item on the Commission's upcoming meeting agendas to maybe talk more about which types of proposals are the ones that we want to do this with. And I think it's good to get some insight from staff and maybe from a development perspective too, because I think, we certainly don't want to create a process that's going to stifle development in Roseville. I don't think anybody wants to do that. So we want to be mindful of that and get in as many voices in how we tweak our process as makes sense to do. So that's some thoughts. I don't know if other council members have additional thoughts. I think always the challenge is how early do you get people in the community involved, and how do they understand what their role is, and then where does that go from there? Because certainly developers want to do a certain amount of expenditure and effort to get to a point where people can understand what they're trying to communicate as to what their plan is, but they certainly don't want to spend any more than they have to the point of view of if this isn't going to go anywhere, they want to minimize their investment. So we want to design a process, I think, that works for our decision making as the government body, makes things not a ton more complicated for our own staff or for ourselves, and then once again is mindful of how the development community fits into it as well. So, unless there's objection from the council, I think that would be a good thing for the commission to have some more discussion about and maybe come back with some recommendations to the council. I did also want to say that sort of in line with, and this gets back to my foreshadowing in my earlier comments, I was thinking about, is there a way to maybe even have a representative or two from the commission, especially on, maybe larger proposals that are more, for whatever, like a better word, controversial, that maybe the commission had a lot of discussion on. Maybe there's a way to think about having a representative or two from the commission, being at the council consideration of that item, to maybe just make a couple of remarks, to summarize the discussion that the commission had, and some of the issues or concerns, because meeting minutes are great and watching your meetings are great, but I think, especially for the members of the public who may not have tracked that whole process, for them to see how that process, works and how the communication goes forward, I think that might be something to think about. I certainly don't want to give you more meetings to attend either, but, to the extent it can be better, and it could be a thing where you, as a particular proposal is being considered by the commission can make a call as to whether that makes sense on this particular proposal, and it may not make sense on all of them or even a lot of them, but where it does, I think that may be something to think about. And I don't know that that's a process we need to formalize necessarily unless you make a recommendation that we do that, but that was another thought I had coming into this discussion. So I kind of appreciated you prompting us with the 4 items, because I think that got the wheels turning.
Yes.
Is there anything else council wants to talk about or think about, or commissioners, Councilmember Strong?
I just appreciate that comment and that information about having someone come. Often it's up to us to try to recount the minutes and make it sound like we did the paper, read everything, because a lot of people who watch us don't. And so they, we come to a decision quickly and easily, and, and they still send us emails. I want to know who did this. And you're like, well, it's a long process. So I think if, you were part of the process, I think it helps provide another level of understanding for people to see that it is a long process, and we do have a lot of consideration about it. But if it works out for you, I also understand. But like I said, and we do all try to take turns recounting the minutes out loud, so it sounds like, we don't know what we're talking about. So what do you mean? But I think just understanding that it's harder for the public to understand how we all work together.
One more thing, and not to put you on the spot, but if someone was here and we had a question, it might be helpful to have you here for that.
Certainly, no, absolutely, especially if we have a question about your deliberations.
You know, we can decipher so much from watching it in the minutes, but it's easier if we can just ask a question. But
Yeah.
it's up to you, of course. It'd be another meeting. So.
And I think you would probably, as a commission, have a sense of those cases where it probably makes sense to do that and where it may not be necessary to, just from your own deliberations. And I didn't want to lose track of the notion of that sort of that tracking document going from the initial stages through, and what were the concerns that were raised, and how were they addressed, or can't they be addressed, or does code not require them to be addressed, or some of those, ways to be responsive and help the public and ourselves track that feedback we got and how we're dealing with it. I think that would be helpful both for us as decision makers, but also for the public in their understanding, and frankly for you coming into your hearing, before the public as well, because that will help you kind of regather your thoughts about something you may have seen a few months ago, and now it's gone through all those steps and it's back before you. So
The other thing about the tracking is if we saw a pattern over a number of developments, that would be something we should actually address outside of that, so that we make changes to the zoning.
I would agree with that, because I think actually it kind of goes back to talking about all the code, changes we did, that we may not have thought about something, or now that it's been in place, that, it's not working like we intended. And so that would be something also we'd want to make sure that you would bring forward if you're seeing that problem with our changes in codes or current codes, that you may want to make recommendations to the council that are causing some unforeseen issue or things to make it better.
The other thing was in relation to the sustainability incentive in the code. I think once again, if the council has a little different take than I did, but I thought our conversation at that time was that it seemed like a lot to jump into a program that was very laid out in the code and had a lot to it without a lot of experience as to how it works. And I think we talked about maybe there was a way to do a pilot or something like that, and I think that just kind of, then it kind of sat and didn't necessarily go somewhere. So it might be worth some thought from the commission's perspective, maybe working with staff too, is there a way to either do do it particularly focused in a couple of areas rather than more broadly, and/or looking at it from the point of view of trying to pilot something, without it being across the board applicable to everything. I think that's kind of where we're coming from, and our reticence to kind of put something into place without some better understanding of sort of how it may work. Because as Councilmember Schroeder mentioned, sometimes we change the code and it doesn't end up working exactly as we expected. And so, we can handle that post-mortem on the, on maybe, on the EV charging station requirements in our parking code that we added,
Yeah.
if one of those numbers as to requirements isn't working, we're going to know pretty quickly and we can make those adjustments. But sometimes, when it's a much more sort of broad program, it's a little harder to know what's going to happen.
Was there in consideration for, what we were looking at was incentivizing sustainability, so sort of the carrot approach. If you do this, or if you do these 3 things, then you get these points and you can have increased density or whatever the, is that of interest to the council to keep going down that path of trying to incentivize through bonuses like that, or looking at more targeted applications like EV charging? We're just going to say, if it's a project over this size, suggest that you make it EV ready. Is there a feeling of direction on that?
Yeah, I don't know that we had a problem necessarily with looking at it from an incentive point of view. I think that makes a lot of sense to do that, especially as we're sort of all getting into this more, and the development community is trying to catch up as well. I think now that I remember our conversation, we did have some concerns about how bonuses worked and how they worked in conjunction with other bonuses that we already had in our code. And so I think there was just some logistical things that we weren't 100% sure about. And so that may be worth some more discussion on the part of the commission as well. It's just, understanding, are we doubling up on some of these things, or how are we counting things and making sure that it all kind of works together? So that may be, but I don't think that we're saying that the incentive idea is a bad idea or anything like that. It could be that we decide to apply incentives only in certain areas to begin with and then broaden it out, or, I'm not sure. But I think definitely we had some issues and concerns. It probably would be worth looking at our meeting minutes again, just to have an understanding of that. I know Commissioner McGee.
Go ahead.
Well, I have a different take on sustainability, maybe than anybody here. But for me, if there was a pattern of objections that we had over the past year and a half, it was density and subdivisions. And if you look seriously at sustainability and realize that we have the highest impervious surface of any of the metro area cities, then when we are now talking about increased density, we're talking about more increased impermeable surface. We're talking about less trees. We're talking about more water runoff issues and more flooding issues, which we already have. And so there's 2 angles to do. There's an incentive angle where we do EV stations and so on, but there's also a zoning issue here where we think about the community at large. And when we put in walking paths, that's great. And we should put in walking paths, they're important, but that is more impervious surface in our community. And we already have a lot of traffic, a lot of air quality issues. And so I think we should pay attention to both sides of sustainability, and the other one is the environmental side, and what kind of environment are we creating here in terms of air quality, health, noise, traffic, all of those things. And that impermeable surface is a piece of that. And if you look at some of our zoning code, I was quite surprised when I went over the code for the units that are on the church parking lot. The side setbacks for those units are greater than the side setbacks for a single-family home in Roseville. And I think anybody who's been on the council for any length of time realizes that 5 feet, if you have a side entrance to your garage, or you're trying to move snow away along the side, or you're trying to get your trailer into the backyard, or your boat into the backyard where it's supposed to be, it's pretty tricky if you've only got 5 feet. And it's also, as we go forward, I think, a light issue, because a 2-story next to a lot of our single-story homes, that's 5 feet from the side. If it's 5 feet and 5 feet, essentially darkens that whole side of the home. So I think there are some things within the code that we could look at. The other thing, I don't know how even you get it in the code, but I noticed, particularly at the one at McCarran's, where we did the large units there, the condominiums with no side setbacks and so on, the community, and at the end of the day, the community asked that lot number 1, which really kind of screened the whole development from the street and from the other residents, that's in many ways all they ended up asking for. And they didn't get that either. And it was sort of, sometimes, like we said, in an early sketch plan, to have, some small thing that does not really impact a large development of 20-some units makes a difference to the community, to feel like they're heard and to feel like they have made some effort to be accommodated.
And so I think that is always our challenge, because ultimately, even if there are objections, if the objections don't rise to the level of something that's actually not allowed in our code, developers can go ahead with a project, as we all know, that still meets the letter of the code and doesn't make anybody happy except themselves. And so, ultimately, we're kind of all in a position where we ultimately have to approve it. So we won't be able to necessarily avoid that, but I think the point being is that we can certainly try to as much as possible, deal with issues as early as possible in the process. And in those cases where those projects end up making it all the way through, we just have to deal with them at that point as what they are. And hopefully that good tracking of all those issues helps us to understand where we're at that point. And maybe it can even be a reminder to developers. And I think that one of the things, and this is not meant to have an opinion one way or the other on the point raised about the density and the impervious surface. There seems to be developing in the community of environmental and sustainability the conflict between, density is good because we don't have sprawl, and sprawl is bad because that's a lot of driving, a lot of excess, miles put on cars, and more impervious surface in a larger area, versus the density, doesn't have that sprawl, but now you've got those other issues. And so where are those trade-offs? And, I don't know that anybody knows exactly what the right answer is, but certainly that's something that was a part of Minneapolis's issues with their update to their comp plan and zoning code, and how that's gone back and forth because of those same questions. So hopefully when Minneapolis figures it out, we can just benefit from all that. I don't know if that would
St.
be
Paul
the case.
seems to have figured it out a little bit better than
Right.
Yeah, so I think there is a happy medium somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, based on my experience on the planning commission, that we've quite found it yet.
Sure. Well, and I think one of the things we're fortunate about is that even with the 5-foot setback, not everybody's building right up to the 5 foot at this point, or historically has. So we're at least in a position where we don't have every home right now already at the 5-foot setback.
Yeah.
So, but those are points taken and things we need to continue to look at and have conversations about. Are there other things that we need to make sure and cover as we've got ourselves with each other tonight? Does the commission feel like you've got some good feedback from the council? Did we miss any of the issues that you wanted to make sure we provided feedback on?
No, this was great. Anyone else?
Yes.
Did we miss anything?
You can always email us too, because we do respond to our emails.
I was going to say, please communicate more often if it need be, yes.
Sure. Within all the constraints of the open meeting law.
Yeah, I know.
We don't want all those
You have to say
comments to
that 'cause
have
the
the chilling
attorney's
effect.
there.
Well, yeah. We want to make sure that we're still having robust conversations just within at least the spirit.
Well, we're all still citizens, so we
Right.
can write to you.
That's for sure. All right. Well, thank you again for being here this evening and for having such great representation of the commission with the joint meeting tonight. And look forward to your upcoming deliberations. Hopefully, we'll actually have some development proposals for you to look at as well. I know it's been kind of a little bit quiet lately now that we've gone through kind of a spurt of all the Riling properties and some other things getting developed. But look forward to whatever's coming next.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. And just maybe a note to Mr. Trudgeon, too, if we need to, and maybe work with planning staff, too, if there's something we need to do related to the rules procedure for the planning commission to, or any of the commissions to add something, let's make sure that that's on an upcoming discussion if we need it on a council discussion. All right, great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have any more agenda items, well, I imagine Mr. Trudgeon is going to give us the update on the future agendas coming up, so
Let me just pull
turn
that
it over
up.
to Mr. Trudgeon for that.
So we have another meeting next Monday. We have 3 in October, and this will be substantially longer than the last couple of meetings. So we have the ordinance amendment with Sacred Settlement. I think the council did talk through that pretty thoroughly before, so I think it's pretty straightforward. But we have that. We want to talk about potential modifications to Rosefest, talk about potential improvements to Rosebrook Park, also look at approving the concept plan for the new park at County Road B, one of our more recent developments, Midland Legacies Estates. We have a couple final plans and specs for some pathways. Then looking to approve the classification and compensation plan. The SRO contract, we hope to have all shored up for the 23rd. We're working diligently on that. And then we do have a nuisance abatement at 2170 Cohansey. As you know, oftentimes the abatements appear on the council agenda, and then they do get cleaned up, but we'll have to see how that goes. After that, we do have 2 meetings on November 6th, an EDA meeting. We have several items that are listed there. And then also for the regular council meeting, we do have a public hearing to accept the County Road B feasibility study and order the improvements. And this is one of the rare projects where we actually will have assessments to the property owners. So there's been a series of meetings with the property owners, and so that'll be coming forward. So that might be a little bit different than we're used to as far as awarding a contract for a road project. We also want to have a presentation by the Community Action Team. It was alluded to a little bit tonight in the PD, but this is the police officers and social workers and housing navigator working together. We wanted to provide an update, begin the discussions on the fee schedule, on the utility rates, also discussion regarding short-term rentals. We're not looking for any particular ordinance to pass that evening. It's more just kind of, here's the feedback we received, let's talk about some next steps when we do that. We also will be hopefully approving the 24 City Council and EDA calendar. I did send that out over the weekend or on Friday, and I know every date may not work for everybody, but certainly it's an ability collectively, if you do want to change some dates, we could. We just follow the same traditional pattern that we've had before. And then the ordinance amendment and policy for the reasonable accommodation, something we've also talked about before. We're just shuffling things around a little bit to make sure we have enough time to cover everything. So that'll be a nice busy couple meetings. The next meeting after that is not until after Thanksgiving, November 27th. So we're getting down to just a few meetings in the year. So you might see a little bit more of a scramble to get some items done before the end of the year, but we'll see how it goes. Yep. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. I just did want to check or suggest on the 23rd, to the extent that there are items that are probably going to have public participation, we should try to schedule those earlier. The ones that are more administrative, we can move those types of actions later in the meeting.
Yep.
And to the extent anything can be on the consent agenda, that's always a good thing too.
Certainly. Yep.
All right.
We'll do. Yep.
Any other thoughts from council members?
Well, on the holding the public hearing for accept County Road B feasibility, they had a very good meeting at the Techa last week, and it was well attended, and the Public Works Department in my opinion, did an excellent job.
Great.
Because it's not always the easiest thing, especially when you have an assessment coming up. So people had lots of questions, and they had lots of really good answers, and seemed to satisfy people.
Good.
So.
Glad to hear that.
Good to know. Right. And just also to that extent, or to that item, I think we have had assessment projects before, and I'm presuming that the assessments are primarily for pathways and things like that, because we don't assess typically the road, other than the road over a certain level of construction.
I'm not sure of the answer on that. Maybe.
We'll definitely-
I think,
Yeah.
well, there's curb going in.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there'll be more
Yeah, so I think it's like anything that's above sort of our standard
Yes.
residential road, then we do assess that, so, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, just want, and obviously, we'll make that abundantly clear as part of the public hearing.
Yeah. I think the last assessment we did in May of 2015, 2016, so it's been a while, so we're all a little bit out of practice with that. So engineers are on top of it, but I'm not all that familiar with the ins and outs of it either, so we'll learn more.
Well, the reason it came up was because I had mentioned I had a meeting with some realtors. They had invited mayors from around the area. And one of the things I talked about Roseville being a good place to own a home because we don't do a lot of assessments, so.
And that
Great
is
timing.
true.
Well, and it is
a
true.
good
I mean,
point.
you know, definitely other communities pay 100% of their road projects
they
through
do.
assessments as opposed to what we do. So it's still a valid point, but it was interesting that you mentioned that just now. Future agenda items for council members or items for like announcements or communications, Councilmember Strong.
Just communication, last week was the Board of Metro Cities, an in-person meeting, first time in 3 or 4 years. And they continue to seek guidance on the SRO. I think we're approaching some guidance, but a lot of questions were raised about the cannabis law and the application in the cities. And so I just know that they continue to seek guidance on our behalf. I asked some other questions that we've discussed in our meeting that maybe were from a different lens than had been approached in the past. And so just wanted you to know that is moving forward at a level higher than us with their interest in trying to seek answers for all of the cities.
And that's great because there are legislative representatives or lobbyists on behalf of the metro cities, and so they will hopefully be able to connect with the people at the legislature who can answer all those questions for us.
Yep.
All right, great. Anything else from council members?
Just a reminder, Thursday is the Northeast Youth and Family Services ribbon cutting in White Bear Lake. The clinic has been reopened and renovated and so on, so that'll be from 3:45. I have until 5 or something like that, so that's on the 19th.
Okay.
And the address is 1280 North Birch Lake Road Boulevard. So you can Google where that is.
And we can repeat the announcement too, that we have the groundbreaking for the Ramsey County waste facility. The waste is the word for recycling slash, responsible use or whatever facilities on the 24th at 4 p.m. On Kent Street in Roseville, it's just off of Larpenteur. So if you want to participate in that. If there's nothing else before the council, the only other item on our agenda is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Groff. Flipped a coin. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We're adjourned at 7:13 p.m. Thank you, everyone.